Hi everyone, James from DC Byte, and we're here to present another market spotlight. I'm joined by Jingwen. Jingwen is our APAC research manager and also looks after the North Asian markets, including Japan. Hi Jingwen, good joining us.
Hi James, good to be here today.
Great, let's jump straight into it. So, why did we decide to do this latest market spotlight on Osaka?
Yeah, so Osaka, I think, as bigger, like Japan, speaking generally, there's been a lot of interest in Japan ever since the start of the year. We've been down there twice, or at least twice for Tokyo and once for Osaka since the start of the year, once in March and another in July. And quick fact drop, if you guys haven't seen the market spotlight, Osaka is actually the second largest secondary market in APAC behind Melbourne. And Melbourne is one of the markets, that we covered on the Australian market spotlight a few months ago, the very first installment that we did. So I thought it'd be a good time to take a look at Osaka. There's not a lot of info on it, on the market out publicly so far. So yeah.
Yeah, and we get asked quite a lot about what's happening in Osaka, but what are some of the highlights and what are some of the kind of the interesting things going on there right now?
Yeah, so I think right now would be a good time to show the platform, because what I do want to highlight is the supply growth first of all, and we can take a look at that here. So before I go into the numbers and historical supply growth, I think now would be a good time to kind of go through the definitions for demand, for supply. For those of you who are unfamiliar with our platform, we do have supply broken down into 4 different categories. So I believe live and under construction, they are quite self-explanatory. For committed, that basically covers 2 different types of developments. One being the developments with the necessary elements for development secured. That would include things like land, power, licenses, things like that. And then the second kind of development that would fall under committed capacity would be powered shells. So that could be like phase 2, phase 3, phase 4 of a new development, things like that. And then our last category is early stage. So all of the remaining upcoming supply where they haven't gotten the necessary approvals or elements for development, all of that falls under early stage. So to go into supply, as you can see, in 2021, the supply in Osaka actually grew pretty significantly, almost twice how much there was the previous year. And to look into the breakdown, you'll see that a lot of this supply is accounted for by these 3 developments, by ESR, Colt, and Vantage. And the interesting thing I think to note is that each of these developments actually fall within different submarkets. So ESR, they are in what we consider central Osaka. Colt is in the east, in 𝐾𝐻𝐻𝐻, and then Vantage is in the north, in the Ibaraki city. So those are the developments that we've seen. We are, or at least I found the supply growth in central Osaka to be a interesting observation. Typically what we see is that a lot of the new developments, they go outside of the central areas in the interest of larger pieces of land, more supply availability. So that's where they go to build like larger campuses, larger data centers in order to meet demand. However, in Osaka, we're seeing a very big development, or one of a few, and the only one that has been announced so far being in central Osaka, where there's a lot of land. But basically the trend that we've been seeing actually in central Osaka, not just central Osaka, but across Japan, has been the acquisition of assets that come with unutilized land and scalability. So that's what ESR are doing with the Nanko Cosmos Square. Some of the other international operators and funds, they've been doing that as well across Osaka and Tokyo.
Yeah, cool. So Jingwen, one of the things, it was highlighted actually on that supply graph there, but it's a lot of the, I suppose, the newer platforms or newer funds that are investing in Osaka. So I think MC Digital Realty and Equinix, they've been established in Osaka for quite a while now, but some of the names that you mentioned are some of the newer platforms like ESR, Vantage, Colt, a foreign firm, not necessarily new in Japan, but Colt, as well as a few which we were discussing off air, which haven't been announced yet or haven't been made public. So we won't mention them just yet, but they are very much in the pipeline. Why do you think it's mainly foreign firms who are investing so much in Osaka?
Yep, so I think the trend, or when we observe that international activity, international entrants are taking place in a market, it's usually a milestone of growth, and it's testament to demand, or at the very least, market sentiment about demand. The operators are bullish about demand, and that's why they're like, we have to enter these markets and be one of the first movers, or have supply available for when they expect demand to come into the market. So that's something that we see, even in Seoul, for example, where we've seen a lot of the international entrants come in about 2021, pretty much the same period that Osaka started seeing a lot of growth as well. So I think that actually leads us pretty well into the next point about demand, being the cloud regions, right? So although, you do know that what my thoughts about it are, so I would like to ask you actually what your thoughts about demand in Osaka is.
Yeah, so I'm obviously not studying it as thoroughly as you, but what we see is that demand from the public clouds, and in particular Amazon and Microsoft, seems to be very strong. Again, these two seemingly have a almost insatiable appetite up in Tokyo, and while not obviously to the same levels as Tokyo, we are seeing significant lease activity across the kind of the three regions or availability zones that you pointed out earlier. So yeah, I think for that reason, that's probably one of the factors which has caused the likes of ESR, Vantage, and a few of the other operators who will be announcing their entrance in pretty shortly to kind of back Osaka. I think the demand profile is pretty strong there, and I think AWS and Microsoft will continue to take significant capacity. I think Google aren't too far behind, and even some of the Chinese clouds are taking chunks down as well. And Oracle and a couple of the other, maybe not tier 1 hyperscalers, but certainly there does seem to be pretty significant uptake and certainly demand in Osaka, which I think mirrors what's happening to Tokyo. Like I said, not at the same extent, but I think there is still pretty solid growth there. And as a couple of people pointed out, and I think Dermot Massey from ESR, in his quote that's actually on the piece, a lot of the different, there's a few differences in Osaka in terms of the power line and the tectonics and things like that, which also make Osaka a nice foil for Tokyo as well. So I think all of those factors are behind why there is a pretty significant demand profile in Osaka. Any other interesting points on Osaka that you discovered in kind of writing this piece?
Yeah, I think it's basically like in support of the cloud demand, right? Being that cloud, or Osaka has its own cloud region that's separate from Tokyo. Tokyo and Seoul, these are the two markets in APAC where AWS have 4 availability zones. You would expect that the cloud region in Tokyo is pretty developed, but based on the leases we've been seeing, demand is still very, very strong in Tokyo, like surprisingly strong. And I do think that Osaka is pretty well poised to follow in the footsteps of Tokyo. When we're looking at the absolute absorption rate or absorption for the clouds in Tokyo versus in Osaka, it's at about only 9% in Osaka compared to how much the clouds have taken in Tokyo. And that is in comparison to the portion of population. So Osaka is about a quarter the size of Tokyo, but in terms of cloud absorption, they've only about 9% of how much capacity they've actually taken in Tokyo. So I do think there's a very, very long runway that the clouds would be, going down, and that would speak very well, I guess, a very, very strong demand that we expect and very strong supply growth in the future for Osaka.
And one other point on that, Tokyo has got well-documented power constraints. Osaka as well has power constraints, but our understanding is it's not quite as severe as what's happening in Tokyo. Is that kind of a fair assessment?
I would think so, yeah. Although it's not as severe, there are still power constraints. But when it comes to demand, in the end, this kind of also ties in with like decentralization as well. The government, they do want to kind of spread out the data center developments across not just Tokyo and Osaka, but the rest of Japan. We do touch on that a little bit in the market spotlight. But basically, our stance is that I think demand is going to be pretty sticky. And because of that, supply is going to stay within Osaka as well. So power constraints, yes, at the moment, but in the short to medium term, I believe they are still pretty well positioned to kind of grow supply there and capture the demand, which, is not going to go anywhere anytime soon.
Great. Well, Jingwen, I think that's a nice way of wrapping up this edition of the Market Spotlight.
Yeah.
For any of you who haven't yet read the piece, it will be, I'm sure there'll be a link tied to this video. All of the Market Spotlights are now available on the new DC Byte website, so go there, check it out. If you've any additional questions on the Osaka market, please reach out to myself or Jingwen. Always happy to talk through our findings, and of course, if there's interest in the platform or anything like that, again, please do reach out. That's it for me. Thank you, Jingwen, and thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you.